So we'll head back into our helpers, and we'll have this internal static datetime get random order placed. And then we'll have an internal static nullable datetime get random order completed. And this, of course, will take a datetime object order placed. So get random order placed should be pretty straightforward. Let's say that we want our data in our database to go back a maximum of 90 days. So what I'll do is I'll define an end date as datetime.now. So that we won't have any orders that are placed in the future when we seed our data. And we'll have a start date of n.addDays minus 90 to get the maximum historical date that an order was placed 90 days ago. And so we then have a time span of a possible amount of time between those two dates. We'll call that possible span. It's equal to n minus start. And then what I'm eventually going to return here is some date, that's some period of time in front of start, but before datetime.now. So it'll be start plus some new span. And the largest possible span is obviously n minus start. So let's define a new span, say new time span, and then we're going to pass hours, minutes, and seconds into the new time span here, where we'll just have 0 hours, and then the number of minutes will be a random number of minutes between 0 and the total minutes that are in the largest possible span. Oops, here, so total minutes, and then we need to convert this to an integer, because we're getting whole minutes here, and then seconds will just make 0 as well. So this might look a little confusing at first, so I'll try to explain it here. This new span is just a time span, and we can define a time span by passing hours, minutes, and seconds to it. And so all I'm doing here is getting a random number of minutes, where the minimum value for that random number of minutes is 0, and the maximum number is the total possible number of minutes that are in our total possible time span. And our total possible time span is defined as that time span between now and 90 days ago. So I'm going to get some number of minutes between now and 90 days ago. And to return some date in the past up to 90 days ago, I'm going to return that date at 90 days ago plus some random number of possible minutes. That way we get a random date time value down to the minute between here and 90 days ago. Okay, so get random order completed is also kind of interesting. We're going to pass that the date that our order was placed, and then we'll have some criteria to determine whether or not the random order completed date should be null. So I'm going to once again define now as datetime.now. And let's think about this in terms of like lead time. So we might have a minimum lead time on any of our orders of 7 days. So what we can say is time span dot from days 7, and then the amount of time that has passed is now minus order placed. So we get this order placed value that gets passed to our function, and then we calculate the amount of time that's passed since that order was placed, which, if you recall, will always be in the past, and we get that value by subtracting order placed from now. So this is going to give us a time span, and what I can say here is if the time that's passed is less than our minimum lead time, then I'm simply going to return null here. In other words, the order will not have been completed if the amount of time that's passed since it was placed is still within our lead time. Otherwise, I'll return, let's say, placed, and we'll add some hours to it. Some random number of hours here, or maybe days instead. So random number of days between, say, 7 days and 14 days. And sorry, this should be order placed. Okay, so that takes care of getting a random order placed and completed date. And so then within our build order list method here in our data seed, we can simply return our orders list. Okay, let's finish up our data seed class by completing our seed servers method. So I'm going to go ahead and put that here, private void seed servers. And we won't worry about passing a particular number of servers to this method. We'll just generate all of them in a single static method here. So this one should be a little bit more straightforward. So we'll have a list of servers, and we'll go ahead and build out that server list here in a separate method. And then for each our server in servers, we'll use our context.servers.add, and we'll go ahead and add a server. Okay, so now we can create our build server list method. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and put this under our build order list, just to keep things in order here. Private list server, build server list. And so what we'll do here is much like we've done above, but we'll have a var servers is a new list of servers, and in this case we can just add them directly, and in fact we'll return them directly as well. So we'll have a number of new server instances here. So we'll have an ID of 1, server name of let's go ahead and make maybe 9 servers, and we'll have sort of 3 mock environments, if you will, that these servers might represent. All this is just fictitious data, of course, but let's say we have like a dev web server, and then we'll have dev mail server, and then maybe like a dev services server. So let's go ahead and complete just this one here. We'll set isOnline equal to true. And then we'll have 2 more dev servers. Be sure to update the primary keys here. So 2 and 3, and let's have like a dev mail server and a dev services server or something like that. Just kind of a mock server that you might have where you're running some of the services that you provide or that your software provides. And just to change things up here, we'll set the mail server isOnline property to false. And then I'll go ahead and create 2 more sets of these. So the first set here will correspond to, let's say, like a QA environment. So we'll have QA web, QA mail, and QA services. And then we'll copy and paste 3 more to represent sort of mock servers for production. So we'll have prod web, prod mail, and let's turn this one on, and then we'll have a prod services server. Okay, so this is just a simple list of new server objects. So this will be pretty straightforward. Basically, we'll have a new row in our server table for each of these servers. So each of them will have a primary key, 1 through 9, and then a name, and then isOnline value. Okay, so if we head back up into the top of our data seeder class, we're calling seed servers, but of course we don't want to pass this any arguments, so that was probably just a copy and paste error. And so seed servers gets called if we don't have any servers in our database, and yeah, then we just generate a list here. And build server list is simply a static list of servers, or a list of servers anyway. And right, so that looks good. So scroll back up here. Once all of that is complete, we call context.saveChanges here in our public seed data method. So that should actually commit these changes to our database. Now we need a way to call seed data when our application starts. So what I'm going to do is head into the startup class. And first of all, in our configure services method, I'm going to add what's called a transient instance of a service to our service collection. So I can do that by saying services.add transient. And this is just going to add, or I should say this would be used to add sort of lightweight stateless services that only need, in this case, just to be run once. So this will just add an instance of a service as it's needed, which is just right here. So we have our add transient data seed. And now we're going to pass a data seed instance into our configure method here. And we'll just call it seed. And so what we can do now is use that to call our seed data method. So we'll say seed.seedData. And now we just need to pass it a number of customers and a number of orders. So let's say we want 20 customers in our database and 1,000 orders. I'm going to go ahead and put this just below, or just above use MVC here. Okay, so when our application starts and our configure method gets called here, our seed data method should get called and basically take a look at our database and see if we have any instances of customers, orders, or servers. And if we don't, then it will add instances of those, and then it will essentially run those inserts against our Postgres database. So let's go ahead and open up an instance of our terminal. So we can view integrated terminal here. And I'm going to go ahead and .NET build. So our build succeeded. We should be able to run .NET run now to actually start our application. Okay, and we're getting an error here that looks like we're failing, an exception occurred, sequence contains no elements. And we can see that's getting called when we're running the link first method here. And so I suspect what's happening here is, oh, I see. So we actually moved context.saveChanges out of each of the methods that run these updates. And so I suspect what's happening is that when we're seeding orders and we're getting a customer in build order list here, we called .first when we were getting a random customer from the database. And since we haven't saved changes, I suspect that that customer that first is being called upon doesn't exist for any primary key. And so I think what I'd like to do is we'll call save changes inside each of our methods here. So let's try this. So we'll save changes when we create customers and likewise orders and servers. Let's go ahead and .NET build again. Okay, so our build succeeded. We can check our database as well. So go ahead and head into pgadmin if you'd like to query the database. And for instance, if I just right click here and run a new query with the query tool, I can select star from customers, for instance. And we can see that that table is empty. We can also check the other tables, which should be empty. So orders and servers should also be empty. And what we'll also do here in dataseed is set a breakpoint here on our build order list and then enter the debug tab here. And then we'll go ahead and run .NET Core launch and debug the issue. So you can see we've hit our breakpoint. Number of orders is 20. So if I hit F10 to kind of step through this, we have a new list of orders. And then so we're going to iterate over each of these orders. So we'll get a random customer ID. In this case, we get the customer ID of 1. We get a random placed date, so we can see that date here. Get a random completed date, which we can see here as well. And then when we're adding our orders, we'll be calling context.customers.first to add the customer. Let's go ahead and expand this. So you can see we're getting a count of 0 here. So it looks as though we're not actually calling context.saveChanges before build order list is created. So we'll go ahead and stop the debugger. And we can do that just by clicking the stop button here. So it looks like we still have an issue. So let's go ahead and try to figure this out. So it's saying that context.customers is 0. If we check our database, select star from customers, we can see that in fact it did generate our customers. So I suspect that perhaps what's happening is either that our code hasn't rebuilt properly yet since we made our updates. Let's go ahead and try to fix that here. So I'll head back into the terminal and we'll clear the screen. And now I'm going to run .NET clean. This will remove all of the build artifacts, and then we'll .NET build. Okay, so the build succeeded. And we'll just double check the code here as well. So build order list gets called. That's getting called from our seed orders method. And this is getting called after we seed our customer data. And we just saw that we actually have customers in the database. So I suspect that this method will get skipped. So we'll go ahead and set a breakpoint here. The other thing that I'd like to do here is perhaps we'll just get out the list of customers. We'll say customers is equal to context.customers.toList. And then what I'll do here is I'll set our customer equal to our customers variable and then call .first where the ID is equal to the random customer ID that we generate. So with that, let's go ahead and set our breakpoint here on build order list, and then we'll go ahead and run the debugger. And you can run the debugger by clicking this icon in Visual Studio Code and then just start debugging. Okay, so we hit our breakpoint. We'll go ahead and move through. We get an orders of 0, of course. So we started moving through n orders here, and we'll grab a random customer ID within the range, so 9, and then we'll get an order placed date that we can see here, and an order completed date, which in this case also populates, and we can see that here. And then we get all of the customers from our database using our DB context. So we can indeed see the 20 customers that exist in our database. So we can see them here with the various properties that they have. And then now we're going to run orders.addNewOrder. And so that time everything worked so far. So I'm going to hit F5 to continue. Okay, and we're getting another invalid operation exception. We can see sequence contains no element. And we can see that this is occurring at line 51 in data seed. So let's scroll up to line 51, right? And that is when build order list is getting called and built. So we're still hitting an error here. We're still getting a sequence contains no matching element. And so we'll go ahead and stop the debugger. Okay, and so after thinking about this for a little bit, I suspect what's happening is that rand customer ID here can be 0. Because actually rand.next can return and will return any number equal to or greater than 0. So we can use a separate overload for this, specifying the min value of 1 and then the max value of customers.count. Okay, so I suspect that's the issue. It certainly is an issue. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and save this, and what I'm going to do is just go ahead and run the debugger again here. Okay, so I'm going to remove the breakpoint and just hit F5 and see if we have any other issues to shore up. All right, so it looks like everything is running. Our debug console has not thrown any errors, and in fact we can see that we're running on port 5000 here. We can check that our data seeder worked by running select star from orders here in pgadmin. And so we only have 20 orders. So it looks like we have another slight bug in our code where we're using the number of customers perhaps, which is also 20 here. So let's go ahead and fix this issue where we will actually generate 1000 orders instead of 20 orders. We can see this is good that we are occasionally generating null completed dates when the order place date is within our lead time. So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and remove orders from the system here in a minute. Let's double check that servers were populated. And indeed, we can see each of our servers here in the table, so that looks good. So I'm just going to delete from orders for now, and we'll rerun that query. And I'll comment this out for now as well. So we'll head back into the code here. And so we have this for var I equals 1, I less than or equal to number of orders. We create a new order and add it to our list of orders. So let's confirm that build order list, if we shift F12 here, we can see where it's used. So we head back up here, and then we can see that seed orders is where we pass the number of orders that we pass to build order list. So we head back up into our seed data. Yes, so we were passing n customers here. So one more bug to fix. We will pass it n orders, which should be 1000. And we'll go ahead and stop the server. And I'm just going to run .NET clean to clean any build artifacts, and then .NET build. Running .NET build and .NET 2.0 isn't strictly necessary, so you could also just jump right to .NET run, I believe. So we'll run .NET run, this time without the debugger. And you can see we're now running on localhost port 5000. So a few bug fixes to take care of there. Let's double check our Postgres database, and if we select star from orders, we can indeed see 1000 orders here. And we have values for everything with the occasional null completed on date, which is to be expected. And so I believe that's looking pretty good. If we scroll all the way down, we can see that we have 1000 orders. And if you'd like to order these by ID, then we can select star from orders, order by ID, and that will give you an ordered list here. Okay, so with some sample data seeded in our Postgres database, we can now turn our attention to working on the various controller actions. So in the next video, we will be starting to wrap up the API by building out some controller actions that will return data in various different structures that we can later consume with our Angular 4 app.